Okay, we are going to get started in just one moment. People are just coming on the call now. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to another webinar with our local MPP, Todd Smith. It's being co-hosted today with the Quinte West Chamber of Commerce. Leslie Lavender is joining us from the Prince Edward County Chamber of Commerce, and Joe Raycroft is here from the Belleville Chamber of Commerce. And we're going to sort of field your questions and engage with a robust conversation with our local MPP and talk about what's in the budget that's going to affect Quinte area businesses, and then also go into the shutdown restrictions and things that are in there that are going to affect businesses. Leslie, I don't know if you wanted to say a few words before we get started.
Thanks, Suzanne. Just thank you to everybody for joining us today. I know there's been a lot of news and shift and shuffle for our business community in the past week. And I just hope everybody is staying safe and staying well and settled in working at home like I am. It's nice to dress comfortably again. And I look forward to your questions today and helping out as best we can. And thanks again to Todd for joining us, of course.
And Jill, any opening comments you'd like to make?
I'll just echo those same things. Thanks, Todd, and thanks for everyone for coming. I know this is a trying time, and as we try to put smiles on our faces, we can look outside and say it's a beautiful day, but boy, this month is going to be a tough one. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Yes. And I'd like to remind everybody before we invite our MPP to start his presentation that there is a Q&A. So I would encourage everyone to use the Q&A if you have any specific questions you'd like to ask Todd. We'll get to them. Jill and myself and Leslie will be sort of monitoring that throughout the presentation today, and we'll ask those questions on your behalf at the end of the presentation. So use the Q&A. We're here to help you get the answers to those questions that you have. And if anything can't be dealt with directly on the call today, we'll make sure that we do some follow-up with the team at Todd's office and make sure that we can get those answers to you. So please take it away, Mr. Smith.
All right, thank you, and thanks Suzanne, Jill, and Leslie for inviting me back to talk about the budget. I know there's probably a lot more that we're going to want to talk about than just budget issues, but I thought I would start there. As mentioned, it's a beautiful day in the Bay of Quinte, thank goodness, but I know it's a tough time for a lot of our small business owners and operators, and it's been a tough 13 months for many of you. You know, some businesses have been able to fare better than others throughout COVID-19. Some have really struggled, and the province and the federal government and our municipal partners have all tried to work together to make sure that there's support programs for you when you need them. And we've continued to add to those programs in the budget 2021. So I thought I would just start with a little recap of the budget that was delivered 2 weeks ago by Minister Bethlyn Falvey at Queen's Park. That's the second budget that we've delivered since COVID-19 struck. And it has two main themes, health and economy, and making sure there's supports there for both of those sectors. In many ways, as I mentioned, it's a bit of a continuation of programs that have been there for the last 13 years, but there's also some new initiatives in there as well. So I think I'll start with the economy first, since we are a mostly business crowd that's on the line here this afternoon. And we've increased supports for the business community and for the economy to $23.3 billion, which is incredible to think that we've invested that much money here. It's going to be really, really important to help our businesses and our families through the race to get vaccinated. And we see a number of supports in the budget to that end. So starting with families with children 18 and under, and not just in school age anymore. This is now newborn right up through until grade 12 students, $400 per child, $500 for those with special needs as well, and also a 20% increase in the care tax credit that we started a couple of years ago. Businesses that receive the Ontario Small Business Support Grant and have been successful in that, and there's been a $1.5 billion that's flowed to small businesses across the province. Over 105,000 small businesses have had their applications approved. There's another 40,000 or so applications that still need to be processed, but those who were successful are getting between $10,000 and $20,000 in cash. And in the budget, you probably heard that if you were successful, you're going to be receiving a second installment of your first installment. So if you got 15,000 the first time, you're going to get 15,000 again now that we're into another shutdown across the province. So I know that's really important, and you can use that money however you wish for staff supports, inventory, PPE, really anything you want within your business. We're also extending the PPE grant program for small businesses and expanding it too. And the Digital Main Street program that I know a number of business owners and downtown business improvement areas and such have been able to access this, that helps businesses move online. There's a Geek Squad that's available there as well. That's probably copyrighted, so I probably shouldn't have called it that, but it's a student support program that's available to help you move online for business sales if you haven't done so already. And I know a number of our local businesses have done this and are excelling in online, where 13 months ago they had no presence or virtually no presence online as well. Particularly of interest to our tourism industry locally, and we do have a huge one, particularly in Leslie's area in Prince Edward County. I won't say they were left out, but they didn't qualify for the Small Business Support Grant program if you were in the tourism and hospitality sector. Now there is a small business support grant focused on that sector. So hotels, travel agencies, hunting and fishing camps, wineries, and all those good businesses that we have down in the county are going to be eligible for that one-time grant as well now. So $10,000 to $20,000. A further $100 million is budgeted for the Ontario Tourism Recovery Program. I was just on the phone literally half an hour ago with the Ministry of Finance, and they're working furiously to put this together so that you'll be able to apply for this in the next couple of weeks. And we hope to have a quick turnaround on that program as well. There's new support as well for our small wineries and cideries. It's a $10 million grant, particularly for those sectors. I know you've probably seen in the news over the last little while, and it's something I've been advocating for about 6 or 7 years now, was to change the tax structure. We haven't changed the tax structure yet, but there is this $10 million formula that's being put together to help out our small craft wineries and cideries. Also 1.2 million for our small distillers, which we have one in Prince Edward County. And that's on top of the supports that have been in place for those businesses. And there's also greater access for craft brewers. One of the things that they were looking for was the ability to sell their products at local farmers markets. So you'll now be able to go to the Wellington Farmers Market and purchase Parsons fine beers there if they chose to set up at that establishment, so getting them more marketplace. Another thing that can promote job growth is a tax credit of up to $2,000 for training and retraining to help people find jobs. So if you're looking for a new trade, now is the time to do it. There's a $2,000 grant that's going to be available, or a credit, not a grant. It's a credit that's going to be available for you. There's the Regional Opportunities Investment Tax Credit as well. It was extended. It provides an additional 10% for eligible corporations that are building, renovating, or purchasing commercial or industrial buildings in this region. And lastly, but most importantly, for many, many families that are out there, but many businesses as well that are struggling with their internet connection, there's $2.8 billion in additional funding for broadband internet. And that brings the province's total investment on broadband to $4 billion. And that's over the next 6 years. We want to make sure that every nook and cranny in Ontario, including those last miles in Prince Edward County or the Bay of Quinte region that don't have good internet, will have access to that 50 down, 10 up service. And so that's a massive, massive historic investment that was included in the budget. There's a lot of stuff that we've done to invest in healthcare. And of course, we're committed to $16.3 billion in investments in the budget that was delivered 2 weeks ago. And that's going to ensure that we can continue with our vaccination program. I know there's probably some of you that have questions about how the vaccine rollout is happening. I just got a message from the Solicitor General who's overseeing the vaccination task force. 108,000 Ontarians were vaccinated yesterday, and we're continuing to put the needles in the arms as fast as we get the supply from the federal government. And I know from talking to the Hastings and Prince Edward Public Health Unit today as well, that all of the clinics that they have basically up until the end of this month are booked solid. So people want to get the vaccine, they're booking, and we can only book for what we have vaccines allocated. They don't want to get into booking everybody, because if we don't get the vaccines, and there's been some irregularity on receiving the vaccines, as I'm sure you're aware, we don't want to be canceling appointments. So we're only booking for those vaccines that we know we currently have in the province, which I think is really important. So there's a lot of money in the budget when it comes to healthcare. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we've really been able to stabilize our Quinte healthcare hospitals over the last couple of years, changing the funding formula that didn't work. It didn't work for Trenton Memorial Hospital. It didn't work for Prince Edward County Memorial or Belleville General. And so we've been able to get permanent funding boosts in there for small and medium-sized hospitals and multi-site hospitals like Quinte Healthcare as well. And we've got a great relationship with the folks at QHC. And there's been $5.1 billion in new supports for hospitals, and they're working so hard, especially right now locally, with the number of COVID cases that we've seen in the local area. Some of those folks are ending up in our hospitals, and some folks are being transferred into our ICU as well. Really proud of the fact that we were able to get the funding to reconstruct the Belleville General Hospital intensive care unit, and that tender has now gone out, and we're going to be adding 4 additional ICU beds there, which are desperately needed at BGH. Also, the new development at Prince Edward County Memorial Hospital was mentioned in the budget again. We're committed to that. And also the redevelopment of Kingston Health Sciences Center as well. A number of those hospitals, and we do send people from our region to Kingston for some treatments. Some of those buildings over there are 140 years old at Hotel Dieu and Kingston General. So that's another commitment that we've made to local healthcare. You probably saw in the news the commitment to long-term care as well. There was little or no activity when it came to new construction over the last 7 or 8 years of the previous government. We have made a massive commitment to investing in new and refurbished beds in the Quinte region. I was at Westgate Lodge a couple of weeks ago to announce that they're getting a new facility and refurbishing the beds that are there. It's going to be a 4-story building overlooking the Bay of Quinte. It's going to be a great spot at their site on Dundas Street West in Belleville. And at the same time I was announcing that one, Daryl Cramp was announcing a new facility to be built in Madoc, another one in Napanee, and that's on top of previous commitments that we've made to build new beds and refurbish beds at H.J. McFarland and Picton. So I can tell you that we have invested $933 million in the latest round of long-term care beds, and well on our way to hitting our target of 30,000 new beds in Ontario. And in the Quinte region alone, over the last 3 years, we've committed more than 1,500 new beds in Quinte alone. And there were only 611 new builds in the last 7 years province-wide. For the previous government. So this is something that we know we needed to do, and we really are getting it done. A bunch more on the health front, but I think I'll stop there because I only have probably a half hour left to take any questions. And I know you probably have many questions related to the latest shutdown that's occurred in the province for the next 28 days. Maybe you have questions about vaccines, maybe you have questions about budget items as well, but I'm happy to take any questions that you have, and hopefully I can answer them for you today.
And thank you for that. It was, it's great to get a recap, and I don't know if it's just me, but that budget released 2 weeks ago seems like an awfully long time ago.
Yeah.
A lot has certainly happened. And I think I speak for all of us and from all the businesses in this region when you talk about the investment in broadband. And I think that for me, that was probably the item that really stood out as being the biggest benefit to our region. It sounds like a lot of money. Do you feel that, with this extra investment, that it's going to get the job done, that we're going to finally see, equitable broadband across our region so that people can work from home, so that businesses can start up? What are your, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I can elaborate on that a little bit more. This is massive. It's a massive, massive injection of funding. We were really hoping that the federal government was going to partner on this. Unfortunately, they haven't committed to it yet. What they've committed to are smaller localized projects in programs like ICON and others. Now they have committed to this type of a program, which is intended to hit every corner of the province, as I mentioned. No matter what kind of ridge you live under or valley that you're in, there will be a whole number of different types of infrastructure that will be used here and types of service providers that are going to be used as well. So more details are going to come on how it's actually going to be built out from our infrastructure minister, Laurie Scott. And we're still hoping that the federal government comes to the table. Their budget is coming up a little bit later on this month. And so we've worked really, really closely with them on a lot of different projects, not projects, programs, I guess is probably the better word, throughout the pandemic. And we know that they stepped up to the plate in Quebec and are supporting the Quebec government on a province-wide broadband internet rollout. And we're hoping that they do the same thing. But in the meantime, we didn't want to wait. We got our money out there up front, and we're going to get this done. As I say, it's going to be a 50 down, 10 up, which I think is going to be great for our business community. It's going to be great as well for people that are spending more time at their living room table or at their home office, working there or doing their homework there, attending school, and so it's a major investment. It's not going to happen with the snap of the fingers. Unfortunately, it's going to take a little bit of time, obviously, to build out the infrastructure. But there's a piece of legislation that's currently before Parliament at Queen's Park that will allow the government access or our service providers access to hydro poles and municipal right-of-ways in communities as well. This was a big hurdle that needed to be overcome, and that legislation is currently before the House. We suspect that that's probably going to pass, and that we'll be able to access all of those hydro poles, because that's where the infrastructure has to go to provide this service. But it's so important, particularly here in Eastern Ontario. And as you know, so many people are leaving the city and choosing to buy a home in our region right now, particularly down in Prince Edward County, but right across the Bay of Quinte region. And they intend to work from home, so they're going to need the broadband, and we got to make sure that it's there.
Leslie, do you have any specific questions about anything that was mentioned about the budget that you wanted to get any elaboration on?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. I had a couple of questions come into me. I'm just pulling them up here. The Ontario budget is providing a second round of funding for the Ontario Small Business Support Grants. As eligibility is based on receiving the first round of funding, when can companies expect to see these payments, and is the government accepting new applicants? So
we were accepting new applicants. The deadline was last night at midnight. So that's not going to help anyone today. There is, as I mentioned, the new program that's going to be impacting particularly the tourism sector and the hospitality sector. So there may be a lot of businesses in Prince Edward County that previously didn't qualify, or all of Quinte for that matter, that didn't qualify for the small business support grant, but would now qualify for this program. So I would just encourage those who are on the line that are working in that sector, or for you, Leslie, or Jill, or Suzanne, that have businesses that are in the tourism and hospitality sector, to keep an eye on when that program actually rolls out. As I mentioned, talking to Ministry of Finance earlier today, they were telling me that this should be out there in 2 weeks. They plan and hope that it will be extremely quick and nimble, and we'll get the funding into those business operators, because they've been hit hard in a lot of cases and haven't had a whole lot of support. For the other folks that were successful in receiving the small business grant the first time, that second installment is going to be coming real soon, is what I'm told by finance. So we already have that documented. There are 40,000 applications that still have not been processed. We received over 200,000 applications. I believe it was 204,000 applications across the province. About 50 or 60,000 of them were deemed ineligible for various reasons. But that means about 104 or 5,000 have been successful. So they should have already received their first installment or will be receiving it soon. And that second installment will be on the way. In the meantime, they're still processing those other 40,000 applications that are in the system. So there's been a major interest and need for that program, and so they're working as quickly as they can to get those funds out the door.
Something maybe to take back with you too is, I know I heard from lots of businesses that the application process was quite simplified and straightforward for the Ontario Small Business Grant. And I'm hoping that the one for the tourism sector will be a similar type of application, where they didn't have to provide tons of documentation. It was pretty straightforward, and I think that's what that sector in particular needs right now, is an application process that's quick, that they can not get bogged down in, and get that money quickly.
Yeah, and that is the intent. We learned a lot of lessons from the Small Business Support Grant program, and tried to make that as quick and easy to access for businesses. Overwhelmed by the response, but I mean, a lot of small businesses have been hit extremely hard. You know, we've been hit hard in the Quinte region with the 2 shutdowns, but keep in mind that other parts of the province, particularly in the GTA, those small businesses have really felt the brunt of this, being closed for the better part of the last year. And so because of the good numbers that we've had here in Bay of Quinte up until now, you know, we've been able to be the first community or the first region to reopen our businesses, both in the first lockdown last spring. We were the first to reopen our businesses after the Christmas shutdown, and same with the schools. We were able to get our schools open as well. You know, now, unfortunately, we've seen an increase in COVID cases here in Hastings and Prince Edward counties that has spiked us from into the green zone all the way up to the red or lockdown zone. Not that it matters now, because we've gone to this province-wide shutdown just to keep everybody at home, and reinstituted the state of emergency. But our cases have spiked here locally. So it's a little bit easier to justify some of these measures now locally, because we're actually seeing the case counts.
Jill, did you have a question on the budget before we move on to maybe some of the shutdown questions that we've received? Oh,
you're on mute, Jill.
I got ahead of myself there. No, sorry. Yeah, I think the internet thing is the big thing. I was really blessed last year to be part of that initial federal program that came out, and they installed 5 at the end of my driveway last March 17th. So I certainly have benefited from the at-home piece, but I also know, because we have a tower sitting here, that is a waypoint for others, that I really hope. And I guess I'm also hoping that there's some investment in actual research beyond infrastructure, because that at some point is going to run out. We can't run wire everywhere. So I'm hoping that there will be some of that.
Starlink actually is one of the service providers that is being considered as well. That's the Elon Musk satellite low satellite system. I'm not an internet guy. There's probably Nesda or somebody on the line that can fix me up on that at some point. But they are going to be really important, I believe, in hitting some of those tough to get at areas. Like I talk about the ridge, living under the ridge. I mean, there actually is a community in Prince Edward County that I've been advocating for the last 5 or 6 or 7 years to get service. Probably you know it, right at the north end of Mountain View Airport and in that ridge, Cannery Road. And oh man, just trying to get service in there has been a real hassle. So I think for some of these satellite services, they may be the silver bullet to answer their hopes.
That's great. Okay. And I know there are lots of other questions, so I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
So, so one of the questions that's come up, and I see there's one in our chat about it, is vaccine. And I think, I know, sitting on the Quinte Manufacturers Association, a lot of our local manufacturers were excited to see that food manufacturers and other manufacturers were identified in the phase 2 rollout. Lots of others are not, but is that something? I know we're not considered a hot zone compared to others, but do you anticipate the businesses here that they can get those workers vaccinated as soon as possible? And will it be done with a mobile unit, similar to what they're doing in other areas?
So there's a lot of questions around this because we just don't know the supply, as I mentioned. So, we're being told that more vaccines are on the way. And we had 2 big shipments that were delivered on the Easter weekend, one big shipment on Thursday and then the other on Saturday. But, of those vaccines, they all had somebody's name on them. We knew that they were coming. Somebody had pre-registered. And so those vaccines are already accounted for. We need to get a steadier supply of vaccines, and that's certainly going to help us get to those essential workers sooner than maybe it appears right now. We just need to know when they're coming. So the health human resources are there from the health unit's perspective. I was on a call yesterday with Dr. Oglaza from Hastings and Prince Edward Public Health, and he indicated that the teams are ready to go, the clinics are ready to go, they just need the supply. And so when the supply starts to flow, we'll be able to get those teachers that are essential workers done, the grocery store folks that have been working so hard over the last 13 months, those who are in manufacturing and, working, not cheek to jowl, but working pretty close with their counterparts in some of those facilities to get in there and get vaccinated. But it really does come down to supply. The system's there, the bones are there, the people are there, they're ready to go. And Loyalist College is our regional immunization center, and they're doing a fantastic job at getting hundreds of people through there every day. They can get thousands through there every day if they have the supply. So it really comes down to that. And I wish I could give you a little more accurate answer, but of the clinics that are already scheduled, it takes us right up until the end of April, given the number of vaccines that we've had committed to our area at this point. As you mentioned, there are hot zones, and they were identified yesterday publicly, high-risk areas, most of them in the GTA. And I've been working in my role as the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, working really, really closely with the Minister of Health and our vaccine task force and the Solicitor General in making sure that we are targeting those areas where people are living in 400 square foot apartment buildings with 3 generations of the same family in the 2-bedroom apartment. And obviously those people are at high risk. And so we want to make sure that we're focusing there, but also at the same time that we're not being shortchanged out here in Hastings and Prince Edward.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions that I did post the link in the chat to anybody who wants to look at it, which is the document which identifies the phase 2 priority groups, which employees are part of group 1 and which ones are part of group 2. And I think there's a schedule in there as well. But I mean, one of the hardest things has been trying to define what's essential and what's not essential. I think throughout over this past year, everybody's eyes have been opened a little wider to what is considered an essential worker, because we all realize there's people that who can't work from home, who we count on to be able to go into work. And I know one of those is people working in restaurants as well. They are front line. I know I had a call today from one of our local restaurant owners who, has said, I've got a lot of staff who have been serving thousands of customers through the drive-throughs, and when can we be on the list? And I said, well, I don't see you in the phase 2 yet, but I'm sure it's coming. But I mean, there's so many people that want the vaccine and so many employers that are concerned about their employees and,
Yeah, sure.
and the situations they're in.
Yeah, and we did make a change to include restaurant workers in phase 2. You know, we had retail, essential retail in phase 2. You know, for whatever reason, it was just overlooked. But clearly, there are a lot of people that have been working in the food sector and restaurants that have extremely close contact with people from the public on a regular basis. Not quite so much now, given the fact that we're in the stay-at-home order and restaurants are back to curbside or takeout delivery. But even as you say, for some of them, they're working the drive-through window. They're coming into extremely close contact. A lot of them are obviously wearing their PPE and their shields and those types of things and taking measures to protect themselves. But they are essential workers and they've been working hard throughout this whole ordeal.
Okay, so I didn't realize that. So restaurant workers are part of the phase 2. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Good to know. Jill or Leslie, do you have any questions on the Q&A you wanted to pose?
You're on mute again. 3 favorite words. You're on mute.
I know. I'm just thinking, nobody ever gives you a second anymore. It's like, great God, tell them right now. It's like a race. Who can tell her first that she messed up? Anyway, no, just kidding. So I just wanted to say that the first question and whoever the anonymous attendee who posted this is, I want to thank you for at least bringing some levity to this, is they want to know when you're recording your next song with the dynamic trio. And I think we have the mayor, Mitch Panchak from Belleville here. So I want to say, yeah, thanks again for doing that. But to be a little more serious, I will just grab the next question. I know it's probably from one of my members who has really been struggling with the challenges, trying to apply for grants, having trouble with that. Everything that she's done has been defeated, but she's still continuing to try and do this. Interestingly enough, her question is not about what you can do to help her, but when gyms and fitness centers can reopen, will the government be doing anything to financially support families needing services, but who are typically unable to afford it? So if she did funding programs for children available for, this is martial arts in particular, but will there be anything from the government to support families?
Yeah, I mean, there has been funding to support families. Certainly the $400 per child that I mentioned off the top is right there. You know, that it's been a significant commitment. I mean, that's the 3rd installment of that funding. The previous 2 were $200 a pop. And then this one is $400 per child, and then $500 for a child with special needs. And you can use that funding however you choose. So if it's martial arts, that's great. If it's you know, some kind of device to be able to, you know, get your schooling and your lessons online, that's great too. But that's been a major commitment to families. You know, on top of that, you know, there have been a number of different conversations with the federal government on our not-for-profit sector and supporting that area as well. And again, their budget's coming up a little bit later on this month. And what we've tried not to do, and without giving anything away, because I don't know what's in their budget, but what we've tried not to do was duplicate programs. So, you know, if we're offering support directly to families for children, they'll be offering a different kind of program, like the paid sick leave program that they're offering at the federal level, that $1.1 billion that's in that program, so that people don't feel like they have to go to work. And so we haven't duplicated that program at the provincial level, even though there's been a lot of calls for it. For those who don't know, and I'm sure most of the people on this call probably do know, there are 4 weeks of paid sick days available at the federal level, and there's still $700 million plus available in that program. So people across the province have been accessing it. It started as a 10-day paid sick leave program. It's now 20 days, and it is being accessed. There have been, I think, 300,000 was the last I heard from the Ministry of Labor a couple of days ago, Ontarians that have accessed that program. So it's a federal program, but we're working together with our federal counterparts to try not to duplicate. So there may be more coming in the federal budget to help families as well.
That's great, because one of the things we heard from the health unit last week, it's not, and counter to some of their directives that said, you know, don't serve people from away in dining, or don't accommodate them. The reality is that our local spread has been way more due to people feeling that they can't not go to work. And so if we can kind of keep so for anybody here who has employees that may not be feeling well, let's find a way to make sure that, and I know Suzanne's been really good about getting this information out there too. Those 20 paid sick days, the employee has to apply for it, but it's there. Yeah.
And it was and just to be honest, it was a bit of a long process. And so, you know, you might take 4 days off and then you wouldn't get the payment until 2 weeks later. Well, that's not going to work for people. So to the government's credit, they've actually shortened that. So you're getting it now within 3 days, is what I understand. Which still isn't perfect, but I mean, it's pretty quick. And while the federal government didn't necessarily have you know, mechanisms in place to get money into hands quickly, not the same way that the provincial government does, because I mean, we have systems in place where we're getting checks out the door through ODSP or OW or other means. It's been a little bit quicker. I mean, there are those who will say it's been too long for provincial funds too, which it has, because of the backlog of people waiting to get their applications processed. But the federal government has acted really, really quickly to get these funds out the door. So it hasn't been perfect, and they're the first to admit that as well. Things like the CERB and now the CRB and the 3 various programs that are available there. But they're doing their best to get that done.
Thank you.
One of the questions in the chat is around the evictions. And I know this is a sensitive topic, but I've been contacted numerous times by local landlords who are just having such a difficult time with some of their tenants. And, you know, tenants, not, you know, some tenants are great, but you get those that are in there that will have used the restriction on evictions, who are using the excuse that they don't have access to a cell phone or a Zoom account to attend any hearings. And it's leaving landlords, you know, holding, you know, basically providing free rent for people. Is there something your government is looking at to help landlords that have been, the one that posed the question today said he has 3 tenants that have not paid their rent in a year. So it's putting a lot of financial hardship on some of our residential landlords.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I've heard this over and over again, and it's a challenging time. I mean, the last thing we want to do is see people homeless in the middle of a pandemic. So there have been steps that have been taken to freeze evictions and those types of things, is particularly during the gray lockdown periods and in those gray lockdown zones. You know, we're going to have a backlog, certainly at the landlord tenant board when this is over. So what we're doing is making sure that we have the human resources in place to try and process those as quickly as we possibly can. You feel for both sides. You know, the landlord has to get paid. They're small business people too. And then you also feel for the people, you know, that don't have the funds right now. They're not able to work, or where they can't pay their bills. So, you know, working in conjunction again with the federal government for programs like the CERB and others, you know, requiring people to pay their landlords when they can, and if they can. It's probably not what landlords want to hear. They would rather, you know, enforce the fact that we get the money into their hands, because they have bills to pay too. It's been a real challenge, I got to be honest, throughout this whole thing, and trying to find the right balance has been difficult.
And I guess, you know, one thing the government can do is make sure that when this is over, that these cases get expedited, because you know, landlords have been like, it's not just a month or two, like it's months and months of rent that they've had to lose. And so, they're going to need to either come up with a solution or find a new tenant, and they can't do that right now. So I think that would be the message that we'd love for you to take back, that there needs to be some kind of quick mechanisms put in place that this backlog can be cleared and these landlords can get some relief from this. So
yeah, I think one of this sort of, if you want to call it a silver lining in COVID, is that the Minister of Attorney General, Doug Downey, the Attorney General in Ontario, has moved a lot of the processes at tribunals and boards into this kind of setting, right? A virtual setting, which should really be able to speed up the process. So instead of appearing in a courtroom, wherever it might be, you'll be able to go through that process now virtually online, and that should really help to speed up the process. At the same time, he's been filling a lot of vacancies on the landlord-tenant board and the tribunals to prepare for this, because there is going to be a backlog, as I mentioned.
thank you. Leslie, any questions that you'd like to pose?
Sorry, I've been listening. I haven't looked at the Q&A.
Oh, okay, very good, very good. So if you had a burning question that had come in. Now, one of the questions in the Q&A was also about, why are we doing vaccinations by age and not by industry? But I think in that rollout, it kind of addresses that a little bit.
Can you say that again?
Yes, there's a question asking why the government is doing the vaccine rollout by age instead of by industry. But is that something that was addressed in the announcement this week?
Yeah. Clearly the medical advice that we were receiving off the top was the frail and the elderly were most likely to, unfortunately, pass away from COVID-19. They were the group that needed to be protected first. And I mean, the results are there. You look at the results of the vaccination programs in long-term care, and we're not seeing anyone or very few now that are dying. That's where the mortality rate was highest, was amongst the most elderly. So that's why, and the frontline healthcare workers, many of them have received at least one shot. Almost all of them have received both shots now. So we're seeing the deaths drop in that sector, which is really important, and it shows that the vaccine is working. Now that we're into phase 2 of the vaccination program, while we are still moving the levels down, and we're now at 60 plus that are eligible to receive vaccines through the Ontario portal, and 55 plus at pharmacies. And we do have the 2 pharmacies, I should point out, in Bay of Quinte that are open, and they have a long list of people that are waiting to get vaccinated there too. One is at Rexall on Main Street in Picton, and the other is at Kelly's Guardian Drugs on Bridge Street East in Belleville. There's going to be more pharmacies added to that list as supply increases. I mean, there's not a lot of supply at these pharmacies right now. So it's really important to note that as supply increases, those pharmacies will be getting more vaccines as well. We'll be bringing more online. But at the same time, we have moved into phase 2 of the vaccination priority list, and essential workers are on there. So still trying to get vaccines into the arms of the most frail and most vulnerable, or those with chronic conditions, while bringing the essential workers in line to receive their vaccines too.
Okay. Well, it is almost 1:45, so I know that we've only got you for a few more minutes. So one question I just wanted to ask before I throw it to Jill and Leslie for them to have a final question is, with any funding program, no matter how good it is, there's always going to be businesses that fall through the cracks, that don't quite meet the criteria. So there's a question in the chat about, their business became incorporated, since last April. Is there a place that businesses can go to if they're just not quite feeling that they're fitting in the criteria? Should they put an application in anyways and see it through that way? Or is there a number or a place they can go to? Maybe it's to your office that they can, try and get some help if they feel that they're just not quite meeting the criteria for some of these.
Yeah, I mean, we've been continuing to try and evolve these support programs to include, businesses that have potentially fallen through the cracks, and we know there are some. that's why we've come out with this new program again for the tourism and hospitality sector, because while, travel agents weren't necessarily affected by the lockdown, nobody was traveling, so they were affected by the lockdown, right? So they couldn't qualify for the small business support grant. Now they're able to qualify for this new program. So yes, to answer your question, if they have questions about whether or not they qualify or feel like they're falling through the cracks, the best place to go is to my office and get the information. All of the programs that are available at ontario.ca /coronavirus, I think it's called, or COVID-19, I'm not sure. But all of the programs are there, and you can see them there. But there's a long list of programs. There's the federal programs, there's the provincial programs, there's some private sector programs, there's some municipal programs that are available as well. So the best place to go is to my office, and my staff can help get you the information that you
Okay, yeah, and Morgan's going to throw your contact info up here on the screen for anybody that doesn't know how to be and get in touch with you or your staff. And you've got a great team there, and I know that they have worked really hard to deal with all the inquiries that have come in. So there it is. If anybody doesn't know the number to our MPP's office, you can also get in touch by email as well. So, okay.
Yeah, and ontario.ca /COVID support is the provincial website, ontario.ca /COVID support. So,
Okay, very good.
and that picture was before Tanya cut my hair on the weekend. Is now that none of that is there, and that's not COVID related. That's Tanya.
Jill, did you want to have any final question for Todd?
I just did see one thing about the reference to people coming from away. And I mean, obviously we're at a stay-at-home order right now. So I think for the next month, we could presume that anybody who's in our region is here because they have a place to live. And I would like, we're coming up on a summer. We had a lot of people traveling in and out of this region last year. We did not see a great uptick in numbers locally. So that suggests to me that the safety protocol that the government mandated be put in place with distancing, masking, sanitization, PPE, plexiglass, whatever, somehow does work. So I would ask that we maybe have some faith in that before we start getting too concerned about businesses that attract people from other areas. And I know it's a contentious point because we want to keep our area safe, but our numbers currently really are a reflection of people locally probably not doing what they need to do. So I'm just going to put it out there and say, please be kind, stay at home if you don't feel well, distance, wear your mask, and we can get our businesses through this. And thank you for all you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. And I would just say to add on to that, and I want to be as optimistic as possible as well. And we were very successful last year. This is a different COVID now. That I called that classic COVID. This is the new COVID variant, which does transmit a lot easier. So hopefully with the warmer weather and people participating in events more outside, while still doing the things that you mentioned, Jill, practicing the social distancing and wearing the mask and washing your hands and all that stuff. Hopefully we can still be safe. But I think in large part, most of the transmission that we're seeing locally has happened locally. And we still have a stay-at-home order in place in the province for the next 28 days. So, while our golf courses are open here in Quinte, and today would be a beautiful day to be out there, they really are open for people of the Bay of Quinte and Hastings and Prince Edward counties. They're not for people from Toronto to come down and play golf.
Exactly. No, very true.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't even think Black Bear's open yet. So, and neither is Trillium. So I don't know where they're going.
Okay, I'm going to get Leslie to maybe have her last question before we quickly wrap this up, because I know you've got yet another cabinet meeting to get to. Yeah.
I'm good, Suzanne. All of my questions have been answered. I reiterate the thanks and the gratitude to the business community for keeping us safe, and Todd Smith for his time in that today, and you and Jill for your coordination and support. I love collaborating with you ladies. It's always so fun to work together, and I think it's so much better for our business community. So thanks to everybody, and And thanks, Todd, for your time. And I don't want to keep you and make you late.
Thanks, Leslie.
Okay, thank you. And I guess we'll get you back maybe whenever needed, we'll get you back. And there, I know there was someone asking if we're going to play some music, but I don't think we are at this point. Thanks again, and good luck. And thank you for representing our region and making sure that we get the tools that we need to keep our businesses vibrant and moving forward through this.
Well, and thanks to you three ladies and your staff at the three chambers. You do such a great job advocating on behalf of businesses in our region. You know, we don't always see eye to eye on everything, but I think, you know, certainly our government wants to do as much as we can to help businesses. It's just really tough at this time. So really appreciate the collaboration, and anytime you're bringing the concerns of your members to us, I'm listening. So thanks again for the opportunity to join you today. Happy to do it anytime.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thanks for
Bye now.
joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, Jill.
Yeah.
Remember